The storm had rolled in without warning, swallowing the evening sky in gray. Snowflakes fell like fragments of glass, sharp and endless, blanketing the long stretch of highway that cut through the forest. Daniel Hart's black SUV moved slowly through the storm, its headlights piercing the whiteout. Inside, the quiet hum of the heater was the only sound. His phone sat on the passenger seat, screen lit with unanswered calls and messages, reminders of meetings, deals, and a world that never slept. But tonight he wasn't thinking about work. He was thinking about silence and how it had begun to feel heavier with each passing day. He was a man who had everything: money, power, respect. Yet as he stared out at the snow-covered road, he felt a hollowness that no achievement could fill. His life had become a checklist, efficient but cold. The laughter of his little boy, gone too soon, still echoed faintly in the back of his mind whenever he was alone. And though years had passed since that night, the ache hadn't dulled. It had only learned to hide beneath the surface of his success. The windshield wipers beat a steady rhythm as his eyes caught movement ahead, a shadow shifting against the storm. He slowed down, squinting through the blur, and then his breath caught. There, barely visible against the snow, was a woman. Young, maybe late 20s, her nurse's uniform clinging to her in the cold, her hair wet and tangled. In her arms she held 2 infants bundled in small red blankets. Her steps were uneven, desperate, like someone at the edge of collapse. Daniel pulled over instinctively, heart pounding. For a moment he thought his mind was playing tricks on him. Who would be walking out here in a blizzard and with babies? He rolled down the window, the cold air rushing in like a slap. "Hey!" he called out, his voice carried away by the wind. The woman didn't respond. She kept walking, head bowed, clutching the twins closer to her chest. He could see her lips moving, maybe whispering to them, maybe praying. The sight hit him harder than he expected. It wasn't just pity. It was something deeper, something raw and familiar. The way she held those babies. It reminded him of his wife years ago, holding their son on a night just like this one. He threw the car into park and stepped out, his polished shoes sinking into the snow. The wind cut through his coat, but he barely noticed. "Miss," he shouted again, hurrying toward her. "You're going to freeze out here." She stopped then, turning slowly, her face pale and streaked with tears. For a moment, they just stared at each other. 2 strangers in the middle of a storm, the world around them dissolving into white. The babies whimpered softly, and the sound broke whatever distance remained between them. Daniel took another step forward, his voice lower now, softer. "Please, let me help you." The woman blinked through the falling snow, exhaustion written into every line of her face. And for the first time that night, she let herself stop walking. Daniel opened the car door wider, his breath visible in the freezing air. "Get in," he said firmly but gently, extending his hand. The woman hesitated, clutching the twins even tighter as if the world might try to take them from her too. Her lips trembled, not from the cold but from fear, the kind that comes when life has already taken too much. I don't even know you," she whispered, her voice raw. Snowflakes melted on her cheeks like tiny tears. Daniel nodded, understanding the hesitation. "You don't have to. But those babies..." He glanced at them, their tiny faces red from the cold. "They won't last long out here, please." Something in his tone, steady, protective, made her falter. She looked down at her children, their small mittens barely clinging to their hands, and the decision made itself. Without another word, she nodded weakly and stepped forward. Daniel quickly took off his coat and draped it over her shoulders, then helped her into the car. The warmth hit instantly, fogging up the windows as the twins began to fuss softly. "Here," Daniel said, adjusting the heater vents toward the back seat where she sat, trying to soothe the crying babies. "They'll warm up soon. Do you need anything? Food, water?" She shook her head, holding her children close. Her lips moved again, whispering quiet words, and maybe comforting them, maybe herself. Daniel watched her in the rearview mirror, and for a moment time felt suspended. The contrast struck him. This woman in a nurse's uniform, shivering, her arms full of life, sitting in the backseat of his luxury car like a misplaced angel. After a few moments, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you. I didn't know what else to do." Daniel turned slightly in his seat. "You don't have to thank me. Anyone would have stopped." She met his eyes in the mirror, and something about that look told him she didn't believe that. People didn't stop. Not anymore. He hesitated before asking, "Where were you going?" She looked down at the babies again, Nowhere, really, she murmured. I was just trying to find somewhere safe. Her words landed heavily in the confined space. Snow tapped softly against the windows like a heartbeat, steady and fragile. Daniel felt a familiar ache rise in his chest. The ache of someone who knows what it means to lose everything and still have to keep moving. He cleared his throat, voice quieter now. I'm Daniel. She blinked, hesitating before replying. Clara. Her voice cracked on her own name as if it had been too long since anyone had said it kindly. Well, Clara, he said, turning the wheel slowly as he pulled back onto the road. You and your girls aren't spending another minute out in that storm. You're coming with me. She looked out the window, tears gathering in her eyes again. But this time they weren't from despair. It was the first flicker of relief she'd felt in a long, long time. The drive through the snow was quiet, except for the soft hum of the heater and the gentle breathing of the twins, who had finally fallen asleep. Clara sat in the back seat, her arms cradling them protectively, eyes red and tired. She stared out the window as the snowflakes blurred together into a white haze, her reflection in the glass fragile and worn. Daniel glanced at her through the mirror more than once, each time fighting the urge to ask what had happened. But something in her expression told him that right now, silence was the only kindness she could handle. When they finally turned off the main road and onto a long driveway lined with pine trees heavy with snow, Clara looked up. The house that emerged from the storm light was grand but warm, with soft yellow lights glowing through large windows. Smoke curled from the chimney, and for a moment it looked like something from another world, a place untouched by pain. Daniel parked near the entrance and turned to her. Come on, he said softly. Let's get you all inside. Clara hesitated again, her instinct to refuse flickering like a dying flame. I don't want to trouble you. I just need to find a motel or somewhere cheap to stay. There's no way you're going anywhere in this weather. Daniel interrupted gently but firmly. It's not safe, and I'm not the type to leave someone stranded, Clara. His tone left no room for argument, but there was no arrogance in it, just quiet certainty. Slowly she nodded, and he helped her out of the car, careful not to wake the babies. The wind bit at their faces as they hurried up the path, Daniel unlocking the heavy wooden door and ushering her into the warmth of the entryway. The moment she stepped inside, Clara froze. The air smelled faintly of cedar and cinnamon, the soft glow of a fireplace spilling into the hallway. A large Christmas tree stood by the staircase, decorated simply but beautifully. Gold ribbons, white lights, and a single angel ornament at the top. Daniel noticed her staring. My daughter insisted on the angel, he said, his voice softening. She says it keeps us safe. Something flickered across Clara's face, a mix of grief and tenderness. She followed him into the living room where the fire crackled quietly. Daniel motioned for her to sit on the couch while he fetched blankets and a bottle of water. She lowered herself carefully, shifting the twins so they could rest in her lap. Their tiny faces glowed in the firelight, peaceful now that the storm was far away. When Daniel returned, he draped a blanket around her shoulders and knelt down slightly, his eyes meeting hers. You're shaking, he said. You need to rest. She looked at him, her lips trembling. I haven't slept properly in days, she admitted. I lost my job at the hospital last week. My landlord changed the locks when I couldn't pay rent. I thought, maybe I could find somewhere new before it got this bad. Daniel's chest tightened. You've been out there with 2 infants? Her eyes dropped to the babies. They're all I have, she whispered. I couldn't let them see me break. The room went silent except for the sound of the fire. Daniel didn't speak right away. Instead, he reached out and adjusted the blanket, his hand brushing hers for just a second. You're safe here, he said quietly. I promise you that. For the first time in a long while, Clara didn't feel the need to argue or run. The exhaustion in her bones began to ease, her body sinking deeper into the couch as the twins sighed softly in their sleep. Daniel stood and turned toward the kitchen, muttering, I'll make you something warm. As he left the room, Clara looked around the cozy space, the family photos on the mantel, the faint sound of a child's laughter echoing somewhere upstairs, and something inside her cracked open. For the first time in months, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she'd been found before it was too late. Daniel moved quietly in the kitchen, his hands steady, but his thoughts tangled. He poured hot water into a mug, watching the steam rise like mist over a lake. The storm outside had grown wilder, rattling the windows, yet inside his home it was calm. The kind of peace that had eluded him since his wife passed 3 years ago. He glanced toward the living room and saw Clara through the doorway, wrapped in the blanket he'd given her. The twins now nestled on either side of her chest. She looked fragile, her hair still damp, face pale with fatigue, but there was something resilient about her, like she'd survived 1,000 storms before this one. He carried the mug to her, setting it gently on the table. "Chamomile," he said softly. "It'll help you warm up." Clara smiled faintly, her lips barely curving. "Thank you. You really don't have to do all this." "I know," he replied, sitting across from her, "but I want to." The fire crackled between them, filling the silence with its soft rhythm. Clara looked down at the babies, her fingers brushing their tiny hats. "Their names are Lily and Hope," she murmured. "They were born too early. The hospital said they might be fragile for a while, but they're fighters." "Like their mother," Daniel said without hesitation. Clara met his gaze, then startled. For a second, she looked like she wanted to protest, but instead she exhaled and gave a small, trembling laugh. "I don't feel like much of a fighter lately." "You're sitting here holding them after everything you've been through," he said gently. "That's more than most could do." The words hit something deep inside her, a place that had long been numb. She blinked back tears, shaking her head. "I thought I could handle it all. The job, the bills, the late nights. But when I lost the hospital position, I just ran out of time, of money, of options." Her voice cracked as she added, "I kept thinking someone would help, but no one did. Not until you." Daniel leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees. "Sometimes people forget what it means to care," he said quietly. "I did for a while. After my wife passed, I shut everything out. My work, my feelings, my daughter. She's the reason I'm even half a man now. She reminded me that people still need each other." Clara listened, the weight of his confession wrapping around the room. There was no pity in her eyes, and only understanding. "You're a single dad?" He nodded. "Emily's 5. She's upstairs, probably listening to the snow and waiting for me to read her a story." He smiled faintly. "She loves Christmas. Thinks every snowstorm is magic." Clara's eyes softened. "I used to believe that too." Daniel glanced toward the window where flakes danced in the glow of the porch light. "Maybe you still can," he said quietly. For a long moment they sat there, two people who'd both been broken in different ways, drawn together by chance and snow and the small miracle of survival. The twins stirred softly, and Clara rocked them instinctively, humming a lullaby that filled the room like a whisper of grace. Daniel stood, his voice low but certain. "You don't have to worry about where you'll go tomorrow. Stay here for now. Rest. Let me help you get back on your feet." Her eyes widened. "Daniel, I can't impose on you like that." "You're not imposing," he interrupted gently. "You just need a place to breathe again." Tears spilled freely down her cheeks now, but she didn't hide them. "I don't know how to thank you." He shook his head. "You already have, by trusting me." Outside the storm howled louder, but inside the warmth only deepened. As Clara looked down at her sleeping daughters and then back up at Daniel, something unfamiliar bloomed quietly inside her chest. Hope. For the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like she was surviving. It felt like maybe, just maybe, she was beginning to live again. Morning arrived wrapped in soft gold light and the hush that only comes after a storm. Snow blanketed the world outside, untouched and perfect, while the house smelled faintly of coffee and cinnamon. Clara stirred awake on the couch, her body still heavy with exhaustion, the twins asleep in a makeshift crib Daniel had set up by the fireplace. For a moment she didn't remember where she was. Then she heard the sound of laughter, small and bright, echoing from the kitchen. "Daddy, look!" "She's awake." Clara blinked, her eyes adjusting as a little girl with messy brown curls came running into the room, her excitement as pure as sunlight. The girl stopped short when she saw Clara, her big hazel eyes curious and kind. "Hi," the child said shyly. "I'm Emily." Clara sat up slowly, pulling the blanket closer around her shoulders. "Hi, sweetheart," she said softly, her voice still hoarse. "I'm Clara." Emily tilted her head. "And those are your babies?" Clara smiled faintly. "Yes, Lily and Hope." Emily approached the crib and peeked in, her expression full of wonder. "They're so tiny." She turned to Daniel, who appeared in the doorway holding 2 mugs of coffee. "Can we keep them, Daddy?" Daniel chuckled, setting the mugs on the table. They're not kittens, Em. Clara laughed softly for the first time in days, the sound startling even herself. Emily grinned and looked back at Clara, her voice gentle. You can stay here, you know. Daddy always says no one should be alone at Christmas. The words hit Clara like a whisper from somewhere higher, something she hadn't let herself believe in for so long. Kindness that asked for nothing. She blinked back tears as Daniel sat down beside her, handing her a mug. Their hands brushed, and she felt warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the coffee. I hope you slept well, he said quietly. I did, she admitted. Better than I have in months. Her eyes flickered toward the window where the world outside sparkled like glass. It's strange. I came here lost, and yet this place feels safe. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. Maybe you were meant to end up here. His words hung in the air, simple yet filled with meaning neither of them dared to name. Clara lowered her gaze, her fingers trembling slightly around the mug. I don't know how to repay you for everything. I came to your door with nothing. Daniel leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. You brought your courage. You brought those girls. Sometimes that's enough. Emily tugged at Clara's sleeve then, her little face glowing with innocent certainty. You should stay for Christmas. Daddy makes cookies and we decorate the tree again just before dinner. Mommy used to do that too. Daniel's expression softened with both pride and pain. Clara's heart clenched at the way Emily said used to, but there was no sadness in her tone, only love. Clara smiled through her tears, brushing a strand of hair from Emily's face. I'd like that, she said softly. If it's okay with your dad. Daniel met her gaze, the silence between them thick with understanding. It's more than okay, he said. Later that evening, the house glowed with warmth and laughter. Clara stood beside Daniel as they hung the last ornament on the tree, a silver star that had belonged to his late wife. The twins slept peacefully by the fire, Emily humming carols as she arranged gifts that weren't even wrapped yet. Daniel glanced at Clara, his eyes lingering on her in the golden light. You know, he said quietly, when I found you last night, I thought I was just helping someone in need. But maybe, he hesitated, his voice rough, maybe it was something more. Clara looked up at him, her throat tight. Maybe we both needed saving. Outside, the snow began to fall again, soft, slow, and shimmering. Inside, two broken hearts began to knit themselves back together in the quiet warmth of a home that, for the first time in a long time, felt full again.